The boy's name was Dylan Thorne, and he had the casual cruelty of someone who had never been told no. He had Sarah pinned against the brick wall of the public library, one hand clamped over her mouth, the other twisting her arm behind her back. His face, usually a mask of smug entitlement, was contorted with a vicious anger. "You think you can run your mouth about me?" he hissed, his breath hot and sour against her cheek. "You think you can talk to Principal Miller and not pay for it?" Sarah struggled, her eyes wide with a terror that was sickeningly familiar. A few students walking by slowed, their phones rising like predatory birds to capture the moment. They filmed. They watched. They did nothing. A low growl cut through the afternoon quiet. It was Luna. The German shepherd stood 10 feet away, her body coiled like a spring, the fur on her back raised. She was old, her muzzle dusted with gray, but her eyes were the same sharp, intelligent points of light they had always been. She was David's dog, and now she was Sarah's protector. Dylan Thorne glanced at the dog, a sneer twisting his lips. Stupid mutt. He tightened his grip on Sarah, and she let out a muffled cry of pain. That was all it took. Luna launched herself forward, a silent gray and black missile of righteous fury. She did not bark. She did not hesitate. She simply acted, her training and her loyalty a singular, focused instinct. She hit Dylan's leg, her teeth aiming not to tear, but to hold, to stop him. Dylan screamed, a sound of surprise more than pain. He shook his leg violently, trying to dislodge her. Then, with a roar of frustration, he drew back his other foot, the one shod in a heavy work boot, and kicked Luna with all his strength. The impact was a sickening, wet thud. It lifted the dog off her feet and sent her tumbling across the pavement. She landed in a heap and lay still, a thin whimper escaping her lips. Just one. Then silence. Sarah's scream was raw, torn from her throat, no longer muffled by Dylan's hand. He had let go in his rage, and now he stood over the dog, breathing heavily. That was the moment John Cutter arrived. He did not run. He did not shout. He moved with a fluid economy of motion that spoke of a life spent in places where noise got you killed. He was coming from the cemetery on the hill, where he had just spent an hour talking to a cold slab of granite bearing the name of his friend, David, Sarah's father. Cutter was not a large man, but he carried an aura of density, of immense controlled power. He wore faded jeans and a plain gray t-shirt that did nothing to hide the coiled muscle in his shoulders and arms. His eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, took in the scene in a single, sweeping glance. The boy standing over the dog, the girl crying against the wall, the silent audience with their phones, the still form of the German shepherd on the ground. He felt a familiar coldness settle in his gut. It was the coldness of the Hindu Kush mountains at night, the coldness of a mission gone wrong, the coldness of seeing a brother fall. His focus narrowed until only the boy, Dylan, existed. "Let her go," Cutter said. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the air like a razor. Every head turned. Dylan Thorne, emboldened by his act of violence, laughed. "Or what, old man? What are you going to do?" Cutter did not answer with words. He closed the distance. Dylan swung a clumsy fist. Cutter moved inside the arc of the punch, his hand coming up to cup the back of Dylan's neck. His other hand pressed 2 fingers into the pressure point just below Dylan's ear. It was not a punch. It was not a strike. It was a precise application of knowledge. The knowledge of how a body works, and how to make it stop working. Dylan's eyes widened, his legs buckled, and a wave of dizzying nausea swept over him. Cutter guided him to his knees, his grip never faltering. "You will not touch her again," Cutter said, his voice still that same terrifyingly calm whisper. "You will not touch this dog again. Do you understand me?" Dylan could only nod, his throat suddenly too tight to speak. Cutter released him. The boy scrambled backward on his hands and knees like a crab before finding his feet and running, his friends scattering behind him. The audience with their phones melted away, suddenly ashamed or afraid. Cutter turned his back on them all. He knelt beside Luna. He ran a hand gently over her side, his fingers expertly searching for damage. Broken ribs, definitely. Maybe worse. Sarah rushed to his side, her tears falling freely now. Is she... She's alive," Cutter said, his voice softening for the first time. "She's tough. She's a warrior." He looked at Sarah, truly looked at her. He saw David's eyes, David's stubborn chin, and he saw a fear so profound it made the coldness in his own gut burn. He carefully scooped the 70-pound dog into his arms, rising as if she weighed nothing. "We need to get her to the vet," he said. "Now." Later, in the sterile quiet of the animal hospital's waiting room, the silence was heavy. Luna was in surgery. The vet had said it was bad. A ruptured spleen, 2 broken ribs, and internal bleeding. Sarah sat huddled in a plastic chair, her arms wrapped around herself, shivering. Cutter sat opposite her, a statue of stillness. He had spent years trying to disconnect, to numb the part of him that felt anything. He had moved to this quiet town to be close to David's grave, to live a life of quiet penance. He had failed to save David. He had watched him die on a dusty rooftop half a world away. He had carried that failure like a shroud. Watching Sarah, he felt the shroud begin to tear. He saw the ghost of a promise he had made to his friend. "Look after her for me, John. Don't let the world break her." He had been failing that promise too, keeping his distance, believing his presence would only bring more darkness into her life. He was wrong. The darkness had found her anyway. He stood up and walked over to her, kneeling so he was at her eye level. "Sarah." She looked up, her face pale and tear-streaked. "This," he said, his voice low and absolute. "What he did to you, what he did to Luna. It ends. Now." He reached out, not to touch her, but just holding his hand in the space between them. "I promise you," he said. The words were a vow, an oath sealed in the sterile air of a vet's waiting room. It was a promise to her. It was a promise to David. It was a promise to himself. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He answered. "Is this John Cutter?" The voice was smooth, cultured, and dripping with condescension. "Who is this?" "My name is Marcus Thorne. I believe you had an unfortunate encounter with my son Dylan today." Cutter said nothing. The coldness was back, sharper now. "My son is spirited," Thorne continued. "And the girl, I understand she's been spreading some vicious rumors. Boys will be boys. I'm prepared to be generous. I'll cover the dog's medical bills, of course. And let's say $50,000 for your trouble and for the girl's silence. A misunderstanding, we'll call it." Cutter looked at Sarah, who was watching him with wide, frightened eyes. He saw the years of fear she must have lived with, the casual terror inflicted by a boy who knew he was untouchable, because his father could buy his way out of anything. "Are you there, Mr. Cutter?" Thorne asked, a hint of impatience in his voice. "I'm here," Cutter said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Your son put his hands on the daughter of a better man than you will ever be. Cutter said slowly, precisely. He hurt a dog that has served this country with more honor than your entire family has ever known. You think you can buy your way out of that? There was a pause on the other end of the line. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Marcus Thorne said, his voice losing its smooth veneer, replaced by a raw, ugly threat. I own this town. The police, the courts. You are nothing. You would be wise to take the money and disappear. Cutter almost smiled. It was a cold, grim expression that never reached his eyes. No, he said. You have no idea what you've started. He hung up the phone. The next morning, Cutter and Sarah went to the police station. The building was small, brick, with a faded flag hanging limply from a pole out front. Inside, a portly sergeant sat behind a high desk, sipping coffee and reading the sports page. He listened to Cutter's calm, factual recitation of the assault with a look of profound boredom. He did not write anything down. So, the sergeant said when Cutter was finished, folding his paper, the Thorne boy got into a little tiff with the girl here, and a dog got kicked. He assaulted her, Cutter corrected him, his voice level, and he committed felony animal cruelty. There were witnesses. The sergeant sighed, a theatrical display of world weariness. Look, Mr. Cutter, Dylan Thorne is a good kid, comes from a good family. Miss Miller here, he said, not even looking at Sarah, has a bit of a reputation for drama. We get calls. Cutter felt the rage flicker, a pilot light in the cold furnace of his chest. He kept it banked. Are you going to take a statement? He asked. I'll make a note of it, the sergeant said, which was the same as saying he was going to do nothing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got actual police work to do. They left the station and went to the high school. Principal Miller, a man with a weak chin and darting eyes, listened to their story in his office. He wrung his hands. John, I understand your concern, he said, calling him by his first name as if they were old friends. But Dylan has assured me it was a misunderstanding. Sarah provoked him, you see. And Marcus Thorne is a very generous benefactor to our school. The new gymnasium, that's all him. He looked at Sarah with an expression of pity that was more insulting than any anger. Perhaps, Sarah, if you were to apologize to Dylan for the things you said, we could all put this behind us. Sarah, who had been silent, stood up. Her voice, when she spoke, was trembling but clear. I will not apologize for telling the truth, she said. She turned and walked out of the office. Cutter followed her, a flicker of pride cutting through his cold anger. David's daughter, unbroken. The campaign of intimidation began that afternoon. It started online. A flood of vicious posts on social media, painting Sarah as a liar, an attention seeker. Photos of her were doctored. Cruel memes were created and shared. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications from strangers telling her to die. The next day, someone spray-painted the word liar in big red letters on her locker. The school did nothing. That night, a brick came crashing through the front window of Cutter's small, isolated house on the edge of town. Tied around it was a note. Walk away. Cutter swept up the glass. He boarded the window. He did not call the police. He knew it would be useless. He sat in the dark living room, Luna sleeping on a soft bed by the fireplace, her side bandaged. She was recovering. She was a fighter. He watched the road, his senses on high alert, every nerve ending tingling. He had been a hunter for years. He had forgotten what it felt like to be the hunted. It was familiar. The physical escalation came 2 days later. Cutter was leaving the grocery store carrying 2 bags of supplies. A black, expensive-looking truck screeched to a halt, blocking his path. Dillon Thorne got out of the driver's side. 2 of his friends, both large and muscular football players, got out of the other side. They fanned out, forming a semicircle around Cutter. "My dad told you to walk away, old man," Dillon sneered. "You don't listen so good." Cutter slowly placed the grocery bags on the pavement. He did not want to break the eggs. "Go home, Dillon," he said, his voice tired. "I think we're going to teach you a lesson first," one of the friends said, cracking his knuckles. He lunged at Cutter. Cutter didn't move back. He moved forward. He sidestepped the clumsy punch, grabbed the boy's outstretched arm, and used his momentum to spin him around, locking his arm behind his back in a hold that caused immediate, blinding pain without breaking anything. The boy gasped. The second friend hesitated, seeing his companion neutralized so easily. Cutter looked at him. Just a look. It was the same look he had given men who were about to die. The second friend took a step back. Cutter pushed the first boy away. He stumbled and fell. Cutter turned his gaze back to Dillon, who stood by his truck, his face pale, his bravado gone. "This is your last chance," Cutter said. "Leave her alone. Leave me alone. This ends, or I will end it." He picked up his grocery bags and walked away, not looking back. He knew they would not follow, not this time. But he also knew this was far from over. Marcus Thorne did not deal in half measures. Cutter was not just fighting a spoiled boy anymore. He was fighting a king in his own kingdom. And a king would use every weapon at his disposal to protect his throne. Cutter knew he could not do this alone. That night, he made a call. He used a burner phone, one he kept for emergencies. The phone on the other end rang once before it was picked up. "Yeah." The voice was gravelly, no nonsense. "Reaper, it's John." There was a pause. "Cutter, it's been a while. You fall off the face of the earth?" "Something like that," Cutter said. "I need you." Another pause, shorter this time. "Where?" "Coordinates to follow. Bring Ghost. And bring the kit. The full kit." "Understood," Reaper said. "Trouble?" "The kind you can't walk away from," Cutter replied. "The only kind that's any fun," Reaper said. "We're on our way." He hung up. Cutter felt a slight easing of the tension in his shoulders. The team was coming. His brothers. Reaper was the best tactical mind he had ever known. Ghost was a wizard. A phantom who lived in the digital world of signals and code. Together, they were a force of nature. While he waited for them, Cutter made another call. He found the number in an old encrypted file on his laptop. Jessica Riley. She was an investigative journalist for a small, independent online news outlet. She was also a bulldog. For 2 years, she had been writing articles about Marcus Thorne's corrupt business dealings, his intimidation tactics, his stranglehold on the city council. She had the smoke, but she never had the fire. No one would go on the record. They were all too afraid. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Riley. My name is John Cutter. I read your articles on Marcus Thorne." "Who is this?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. "I'm the man who's going to give you the fire," he said. He met her an hour later at an all-night diner on the highway. She was sharp, intense, with eyes that missed nothing. She listened to his story, her pen flying across her notepad. When he was done, she put her pen down. "I believe you," she said. "Every word. But it's still your word against his. And his word is backed by a mountain of money and a legion of crooked officials." "I know," Cutter said. That's why we're not going to play by his rules. What are you planning? She asked. To give you irrefutable proof, he said. I just need you to be ready to publish it when I do. She looked him in the eye, a long, searching gaze. I've been waiting for someone like you for a long time, Mr. Cutter, she said. You get me the proof, I'll get it to the world. I promise. His last stop before dawn was a small, dusty law office in the next town over. The name on the door was Frank Miller, attorney at law. Below it, a small brass plaque read, Semper Fidelis. Miller was a former Marine JAG officer, a bulldog of a man with a shaved head and a handshake that could crush walnuts. He and Cutter had crossed paths once in Afghanistan, a brief but memorable encounter involving a disputed airstrike and a lot of shouting. Miller remembered him. He listened to the story, leaning back in his chair, his face unreadable. Thorne, he grunted when Cutter finished. I know the name. He's a cancer on this whole county. You got any evidence? Not yet, Cutter said, but we will. And the cops won't help? The cops work for him. Miller nodded slowly. Figures. He leaned forward, his hands flat on his desk. This is a pro bono case. That means I don't get paid unless we win. And winning against a guy like Thorne in his own backyard, it's a long shot. I don't need a long shot, Cutter said. I need a lawyer who will fight. Frank Miller smiled, a grim, wolfish expression. Son, he said, fighting is all I know how to do. Reaper and Ghost arrived before sunrise, their black, unmarked van pulling silently into Cutter's driveway. They moved with the quiet efficiency of ghosts, unloading Pelican cases full of equipment. Within an hour, Cutter's small house was transformed into a tactical operations center. Ghost set up his bank of laptops, his fingers flying across the keyboards. I'm in, he said after a few minutes. Thorne's personal network, his business servers, city hall records. It's all sloppy, arrogant. He started pulling data, terabytes of it, searching for the digital threads that connected Marcus Thorne's money to the silence of the town's officials. Reaper, meanwhile, was studying a satellite map of the Thorne estate. It was a massive compound, surrounded by a high wall and state-of-the-art security. Cameras, pressure plates, infrared beams, Reaper murmured, pointing at the screen. He's paranoid, or he has a lot to hide. Both, Cutter said. We'll need eyes inside, Reaper said. He produced a drone, no bigger than a hummingbird. It was silent, nearly invisible. They launched it from the woods behind Cutter's house. Ghost piloted it with a set of VR goggles, guiding it over the walls of the Thorne estate. The live feed appeared on one of the monitors. They watched the movements of the security guards. They mapped the blind spots in the camera coverage. They built a complete picture of the fortress. While they worked, Jessica Riley was doing her own digging. She started with old court records, looking for any past complaints against Dylan or Marcus Thorne. She found a dozen sealed settlements, harassment claims, assault allegations, a wrongful termination suit. All of them quietly paid off and buried. She started making a list of names. She began making calls. The first 5 people hung up on her the moment she said the name Thorne. The 6th, a woman who had been a secretary at Thorne's company 5 years ago, hesitated. I can't talk about it, the woman whispered, her voice trembling. I signed an agreement. He can't hurt you anymore, Jessica said, her voice gentle but firm. There are others now. You're not alone. The woman started to cry. He ruined my life, she sobbed. She started talking. One by one, as Jessica and Frank Miller reached out to them, The other victims began to find their courage. A contractor Thorne had bankrupted by refusing to pay him. A young woman Dylan had assaulted at a party 2 years ago, whose family had been threatened into silence. A city councilman who had been blackmailed into voting for Thorne's zoning changes. The wall of silence Marcus Thorne had built around himself was beginning to crack. They were building a case, a powerful one. But Cutter knew it wasn't enough. Thorne would bury them in legal motions. He would buy judges and intimidate witnesses. They needed something undeniable, something that would turn the entire town against him in an instant. They needed to catch him in the act. And Cutter knew that to do that, the bait had to be something Thorne couldn't resist. It had to be Sarah. But he would never put her in that kind of danger. He would find another way. He had to. The breaking point came on a cold, rainy Tuesday night. Sarah had been staying with a school friend, trying to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the town. Cutter had insisted. He thought she would be safer there. He was wrong. Dylan Thorne, his ego bruised, his rage festering, had been watching the house. He waited until Sarah was walking to her car, the street dark and empty. He didn't bring his friends this time. This was personal. He grabbed her from behind, dragging her into the shadows between two houses. "You and your crazy old man think you can get away with this?" He snarled, his face inches from hers. "You're going to learn your place." He hit her, an open-handed slap, hard enough to make her head ring. But Sarah was not the same girl he had cornered at the library. Something had changed in her. Cutter's promise, the support of his friends, the knowledge that she was no longer alone. She fought back. She kicked, she screamed, she clawed at his face with her nails. She drew blood. Her defiance only enraged him further. He lost control. He hit her again, this time with a closed fist, and again. He beat her until she fell to the ground, limp and unresponsive. He stood over her, breathing heavily, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. He looked down at his hands, at the blood that wasn't his. For the first time, a flicker of fear pierced his rage. He had gone too far. He turned and ran, disappearing into the rainy night. The call came to Cutter 20 minutes later. It was from Sarah's friend's mother. She was hysterical. Cutter didn't hear most of the words. He only heard hospital and Sarah. He drove the 15 miles to the county hospital in under 10 minutes. Reaper was with him. They found her in the emergency room. She was lying on a gurney, her face a swollen purple mask. One eye was bruised shut. A tube ran into her nose. A doctor was talking to a police officer. Cutter walked past them as if they weren't there. He stood beside Sarah's bed. He looked at what Dylan Thorne had done to her, to David's daughter. The coldness in his chest did not burn. It did not flicker. It solidified. It turned into a block of black ice, a singularity of pure, focused rage. The part of him that was John Cutter, the quiet man trying to find peace, died in that moment. The part of him that was a seal, a weapon forged in the crucible of war, took control. He gently took Sarah's hand. It was limp in his. He saw the dark flecks of dried blood under her fingernails. His blood, DNA evidence. She had fought back. Even in her terror, she had been a warrior. He turned to Reaper, who had been standing silently by the door. Cutter's eyes were terrifying. They were the eyes of a man who had made a decision from which there was no turning back. "The rules are gone," Cutter said, his voice flat and deadly. "We're not building a case anymore." He looked back at Sarah's battered face. "We're ending this. Tonight." Reaper just nodded, The ghost is already working, he said. Back at the house, Ghost was a whirlwind of motion. The attack happened here, he said, pointing to a spot on the satellite map. There are no city cameras on that street, but there is a private residence on the corner with a high-end security system, the one Thorne's own company installed. Can you get into it? Cutter asked. Ghost smiled thinly. I've been in it for the past hour. The owner has a camera pointed at his prize-winning roses. It also happens to have a perfect view of the street where Sarah was attacked. He typed a command. An image appeared on the screen. It was grainy, shot through the falling rain, but it was unmistakable. Dylan Thorne dragging Sarah into the shadows. Dylan Thorne running away minutes later, alone. The file was deleted 10 minutes after the attack, Ghost said. Remotely, from an IP address that traces back to the Thorne estate, but they don't know about off-site cloud backups. He saved the file. We have him, Reaper said. We have the son, Cutter corrected him. I want the father. I want the whole rotten tree, roots and all. Ghost turned back to his main screen, where lines of code were scrolling. Working on it, he said. While Thorne was busy erasing security footage, he got sloppy. He made a voice call to the chief of police, a call I happened to be recording. He played the audio. Marcus Thorne's voice, tight with panic. My son made a mistake. A big one. The Miller girl. You need to make this go away. The usual way. The police chief's voice, weary. Marcus, this is getting out of hand. Assault is one thing. Putting a girl in the hospital. Thorne's voice, turning venomous. Do you want me to remind you how you got that job? Do you want me to send the photos of your hobby to your wife? Just do it. The chief's sigh of defeat. Okay, Marcus. Okay. Ghost stopped the recording. That's the conspiracy, he said. That's the root. Cutter nodded. The plan formed in his mind, cold and precise. Jessica Riley, he said. Is she ready? She's been ready for 2 years, Reaper said. And Miller? He's already filing an emergency injunction to get a sample of Dylan's DNA. Good, Cutter said. There's a town hall meeting tomorrow night. Thorne is the keynote speaker. He's announcing his new waterfront development project. Reaper and Ghost looked at him. They understood immediately. A public forum, Reaper said, a slow smile spreading across his face. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. He built his kingdom on public opinion and fear, Cutter said. We're going to tear it down in front of everyone he's ever bullied. The next evening, the town hall was packed. Marcus Thorne stood at the podium, basking in the applause. He was a master of performance, projecting an image of confidence and civic pride. He spoke of progress, of jobs, of a bright future for the town, a future he was building. Cutter stood at the back of the room, a silent shadow. Reaper was outside, coordinating. Ghost was patched into the hall's audio-visual system from his van. Jessica Riley sat in the front row, a laptop open in front of her. Frank Miller was next to her, a grim-faced statue. In the third row sat a dozen people, the other victims. The woman from the office, the bankrupted contractor, the former city councilman. They sat together, drawing strength from each other. Thorne finished his speech to another round of applause. He opened the floor to questions. Jessica Riley's hand shot up. Thorne, not recognizing her, smiled magnanimously and pointed. Yes, you in the front. Jessica walked to the microphone in the center aisle. Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice clear and steady, ringing through the auditorium. Jessica Riley, Crier News. You speak of building a better future for our town. I'd like to ask you about the foundation you've built it on. Thorne's smile tightened. On the screen behind you, Jessica said, is security footage from last night. On cue, the large projector screen behind Thorne, which had been showing architectural renderings of his new project, flickered. It was replaced by the grainy, rain-swept video. The crowd gasped. They saw Dylan Thorne's brutal attack on Sarah. Marcus Thorne's face went white. He stared at the screen in horror, then spun around, looking for the projection booth. "Turn that off!" he bellowed. "Turn that off right now!" But the video kept playing. And now, Jessica's voice cut through his shouts. "I'd like to play an audio recording of a phone call you made to our chief of police shortly after this attack occurred." Thorne's panicked voice filled the hall. "My son made a mistake. You need to make this go away." The chief of police, who was sitting on the stage, looked like he was about to be sick. The hall erupted into a cacophony of shouts and angry murmurs. The foundation of fear was crumbling. Then, a side door opened. Sarah walked in. She was flanked by Frank Miller. Her face was still bruised, but she walked with her head held high. The crowd parted for her as she walked to the microphone. The hall fell silent. She looked directly at Marcus Thorne, who stood frozen on the stage, his empire collapsing around him. "My name is Sarah Miller," she said, her voice shaking only slightly. "And I am not afraid of you anymore." She looked out at the crowd, at the faces of her neighbors, her teachers, her classmates. "I am not the only one," she said. "For years, he and his son have used their money and their power to hurt people and to buy the silence of this town. But tonight, the silence ends." As if on cue, the woman who had been Thorne's secretary stood up, then the contractor, then the councilman. One by one, the other victims rose to their feet, a silent chorus of defiance. At that moment, the main doors of the auditorium burst open. It was not the local police. It was a team of state troopers, led by a single, honest local officer named Evans, a man Frank Miller had vetted and brought into the plan. Officer Evans walked onto the stage, a pair of handcuffs in his hand. "Marcus Thorne," he said, his voice amplified by the microphone. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to obstruct justice, bribery, and witness tampering." Another trooper was already cuffing the police chief. A third was walking toward a stunned Dylan Thorne, who was sitting in the front row. It was over. The takedown was absolute. The trial was a formality. Faced with the mountain of evidence, the video, the audio, the DNA under Sarah's nails, and the testimony of a dozen victims who had finally found their voice, Marcus Thorne and his son had no defense. The news reports told the story. Guilty on all counts. Marcus Thorne received 20 years in federal prison for racketeering and corruption. Dylan Thorne received 15 for attempted murder and assault. The police chief, the principal, and 2 city council members were also convicted for their roles in the cover-up. The system, for once, had worked, because Cutter and his team had forced it to. A few weeks after the verdict, a man came to Cutter's house. He was one of the students who had filmed the initial assault on his phone. He stood on the porch, twisting his baseball cap in his hands. I wanted to apologize," he said, not meeting Cutter's eyes. "For not doing anything. For just standing there." He held out his phone. "This is the original video," he said. "I never deleted it. I thought maybe the lawyer could use it." Cutter took the phone. "Thank you," he said. "It takes courage to do the right thing." The boy nodded and walked away, his shoulders a little less slumped. Cutter found his new purpose in the quiet aftermath. He used his savings and his GI Bill to start a nonprofit. He took in retired military working dogs, dogs like Luna, who were too old to serve but still had so much to give. He trained them to be service animals for veterans struggling with the invisible wounds of war. He found a new way to save his brothers. The final scene was one of peace. A warm autumn evening. Cutter sat on the porch of his small house, the window now repaired. Sarah sat in the chair beside him, reading a book for school. The bruises on her face had faded, replaced by a quiet confidence that had not been there before. She was healing. They were all healing. Luna, fully recovered, lay at Cutter's feet, her head resting on his lap. Every now and then, her tail would give a soft thump against the wooden planks of the porch. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The silence between them was comfortable, a shared space of understanding and peace earned through fire. Cutter looked out at the setting sun, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He had come to this town to be alone, to pay a debt to a ghost. He had failed to save David on that rooftop. But here now, in the quiet of the evening, he had finally fulfilled his promise. He had protected his friend's daughter. He had brought her through the storm. He reached down and stroked Luna's head, his fingers tracing the familiar shape of her skull. The loyal dog, the silent witness, the first one to fight for her. She looked up at him, her dark, intelligent eyes full of a love that asked for nothing in return. The war was over. They were home.